What's up? My name is Dave, and as you know, I interpret everything. Today I'm going to be interpreting Spider-Man Homecoming, the very first full Spider-Man solo film to come out of the MCU, starring Tom Holland as Peter Parker, who's navigating through life as the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, desperate to be included in another Avengers event after first showing up in Civil War to battle alongside Iron Man. On his day-to-day activities, he is crushing pretty hard on Liz, who is a student in his class, and throughout the film, he constantly battles his nerdy self with the popularity that he knows that he can achieve if he just lets Spider-Man take the wheel once in a while. When the Vulture shows up, played by Michael Keaton, all bets are off because this dude will kill Peter dead if he interferes with his business. First and foremost, gotta give a huge shout out and thanks to my boy Trav from Trav Tries, who is joining once again to discuss a Marvel film featuring Spider-Man in my never-ending Critics Initiative endeavor. This is something that I started, I don't even remember how long ago. My entire plan for it has kind of fallen through the cracks over the months as other critics have better things to do than to stick with a collaboration series on my channel until the end of time, but I appreciate Trav doing this, as this was a series within a series that I was definitely excited to talk about with somebody, and I hope that he does come back to talk about Far From Home and No Way Home and all of that as well, but we'll have to be hearing what he has to say about Homecoming in just a hot second! First though, let's talk positives about this film as a whole. The way that I've tracked this film over the years, this is at least my fourth time, probably fifth, watching the film. And as a Spider-Man fan, that's easy to say because when we talk about DC comics, it's Superman all the way. But when we're talking about Marvel, it's usually Spider-Man, though I do have a lot of love for the characters that Marvel has introduced to me over the years. But no matter what, it will always be hard for me to ever give Spidey the cold shoulder. And live action with this character has always kind of been all over the place, as the vision behind these live action variations has been different every single time. The Raimi films were interesting because they were directed by a man with a deep history and passion and love for horror films. So while a lot of that origin story stuff was relatable and fun and endearing, the villains were always a strike contrast because Raimi obviously loved dipping his toes into making these villains come out basically right out of a horror film. The Andrew Garfield films, on the other hand, were different as it felt more like the comics in a way, as his variation of Spider-Man, the character of Spider-Man, was some of the best in regards to humor. But the stories got to be a little bit convoluted. They had that entire mystery surrounding Peter's parents, and they planned to reveal a little bit of it each film. And then The Amazing Spider-Man 2 ultimately killed the series because of how many storylines and villains and setups that they had for Sinister Six that never happened. I wasn't sure what the vision behind this MCU variation would be because MCU is a very specific universe of films that all kind of sort of feel a very specific way. The vision that I see with Spider-Man Homecoming is a love and respect for 80s coming-of-age films such as Breakfast Club or Ferris Bueller's Day Off, John Hughes films, in terms of how those movies present the chemistry they all have, the childlike romances and relationships that we can all relate with, and that's something that Trav's going to be talking about as well, how relatable these characters are for a variety of different ways. That is something that John Hughes was very talented at recreating, which is why a lot of promotional materials around this film also did the same thing and remade classic posters for movies like that. It wanted you to know that this film will feel like those movies, maybe even just by slightly. And it does. Mix that with your typical Spider-Man heroics, and you really do have something special on your hands. Now, because I don't really have that many negatives for the film, I'm just going to go ahead and give Trav his time to shine to talk about the film. I have some more to discuss in a minute, obviously, but here's Trav. Take it away, man.
What's up, y'all? First of all, I just want to thank Dave for even having me on. It's kind of an honor in a way because I've been a huge Spider-Man fan like my whole life. Grew up on the Raimi trilogy. The Raimi trilogy probably is responsible for me being a film fan today. At a very early age. I'm going to try not to take much of your time, but Homecoming is a special spot in the MCU. I think even more so when you look back at it now, I feel like it actually aged better And I don't know if Dave will agree. I'll be curious on his opinion, but I think Homecoming aged better, especially with how the MCU is today. It's just kind of this nice sweet spot of like when Marvel knew what they were doing, especially with all like the villains set up in here that never actually end up sort of going anywhere, but it still is nicely contained in the film, unlike Amazing Spider-Man 2, which is kind of more of a setup for a movie that never happened. Homecoming is so special. It's such a like charming movie, and it feels like a Spider-Man movie as well. It feels like a Spider-Man movie, and I don't know how to quite put my finger on it. Maybe it's just like the boyhood, like trying to become an adult man, Peter Parker, the youngest I think we've seen in live action. Well, even though Tobey Maguire, was technically in those movies was a young age, but you actually could tell that Tom Holland is like actually this young kid in school, had previously, before the events of Civil War, got bit by a spider, and now he's having to deal with the responsibility of being Spider-Man under the sort of surveillance and mentorship of Tony Stark, which, you know what? I've embraced. Over time, I've embraced it. Back then, I didn't want Spider-Man to be Iron Spider. I wanted him to sort of be able to do his own thing and then and be able to make it on his own. But you know what? In the MCU, this makes sense. And it's fine also because we've never seen this version of Spider-Man yet that needed that mentor. And why not in the Marvel Cinematic Universe where you have all these characters? And I think the mentorship part of this movie really is a highlight. Like the scene when Iron Man pulls him out of the water and he's like, I'm not here. And it's like just the Iron Man suit floating. He's in a whole other country. Really charming, turning on the heater on his suit. And then later on in the movie, when he has that pep talk with him on the rooftop, he's like, you're not even really here. He steps out and you just like feel the like, oh snap, Peter is in trouble this time. Like, I think it was better than it's ever been. And I think it's just comes from the charm, the humor. The humor matches a Spider-Man tone very well. But when it does get dark, which I feel like every Spider-Man movie has, every Spider-Man comic, cartoon, and movie has its little bit of darkness that it needs. Because Spider-Man is not Batman, okay? You can't always be dark and brooding, but there's the comedy there, dark when it needs to be. Big highlight of this movie is Michael Keaton as the Vulture. Different version of Vulture than we've ever seen. He's not just like this decrepit old man in a clock tower. They wrote it differently, and I think it fits really well. A guy that just hates Tony Stark pretty much and has his own tech, his own suit, and the Vulture suit, the mechanical, you could tell that it's like not quite Stark tech. It doesn't work super smooth like Stark stuff does, and I love that about it. I love that it feels so mechanical when he flies, and there's mistakes in the machinery, but it can do a lot, and it looks incredible, and like with the helmet and everything. And Michael Keaton, bro, is intimidating. I feel like Michael Keaton is not talked about enough as one of the great MCU villains. And it feels contained. It doesn't feel like he has to belong to the bigger universe of the MCU. He fits in this solo story very nice and neat. So much so that he is the father of the girl that Peter likes in this movie. And that right there is one of the best sequences in any Spider-Man film. Whenever Peter asks Liz out to the prom, he goes to her house to go with her, to pick her up, whatever, opens the door, and it's the Vulture. And Tom Holland's acting in that scene is so relatable to like you, even down to taking the picture with Liz with the dress, like the mom is taking their photo. There's like a couple pictures she takes where he's literally just looking at Michael Keaton because he is in disbelief. It's exactly the type of like feeling and movement that I would have, because once you're in that state of mind where you're like, oh crap, like something is really wrong in your life right now, you can't focus. You can't just turn a switch, and he's also just a kid. He's still learning social skills, and you can tell. And it's a very, very beautiful example of a young Peter Parker. Michael Keaton figures out he's Spider-Man, even down to like the groundedness of he's like, I recognize your voice from somewhere. That makes sense. There's been superhero movies in the past where the villain just can't tell somehow that it's their voice. It's so clearly Tom Holland. And just the different camera shots of Michael Keaton being so dang scary, and he has the pep talk with Peter. I'm gonna kill you, and everybody you love if you do not get out of my business. And he saved his life in a way. He was gonna let him go. He had a heart about the situation. He didn't want to kill a kid. He doesn't want to kill Spider-Man. So there's like a lot of layers there to that villain that they didn't even really completely explore, but it's there on the screen. And it's just nice that it feels, this movie Homecoming feels so contained. All the jokes, dude. All the jokes, like him trying to call Ned when he has the little like purple explosive thing, like he's like, Ned, call me back, the glowy thing's a bomb, or whatever. Like, are you really friends with Peter Parker? And like, I don't know, there's a Flash, incredible. I think watching this movie after getting to know these characters better in like other movies like No Way Home and stuff like that, really adds to them now. It really helps. Like, I think Homecoming is honestly just better because of all we've seen them go through after this point. Maybe there's a couple scenes here and there where you feel a little bored, but not as much as Far From Home. This movie is definitely better than Far From Home. If any negatives are in this movie, it's really just minor nitpicks. Anyway, I appreciate you guys watching this segment of the review. Thank you to Dave again, and I'll see you guys next time.
Thank you to Trav from Trav Tries once again for joining me on my review. I love hearing your thoughts, man, because for the most part, our thoughts definitely align. This movie really did age like fine wine, but the reason why I agree with you there might actually not be the same that you think of. But basically, I think the more this Spider-Man series has existed, the more complicated that it got. Like with No Way Home. Great fan service film. Made a lot of people very, very happy for very obvious reasons. But the simplicity wasn't there anymore. And the more simple the plot, the better the film. Which is true for a lot of movies, but I would wager a guess that you don't really care so much about Peter as a human being. At least not as much as you do right now with Spider-Man Homecoming, because it's just so innocent and so simple and so straightforward. Also, Trav, you mentioned how great Keaton was as the Vulture, especially during that car sequence when he confronts Peter and he realizes who he is. And again, I agree. That brings me back to the horror direction of Sam Raimi. This scene reminded me of those moments. And while watching, I couldn't help but think, man, you know what? Bryan Cranston. He would have been a shoo-in for this character. Basically a goofball and a half as a dad, but he flips on a dime when he assumes his evil alter ego. Maybe a bit too Heisenberg from Breaking Bad, but still that would have been pretty interesting and definitely a fun casting choice. One thing that I thought was kind of weird, and it feels weird every single time I watch this movie, is specifically the non-importance of MJ. She's just kind of there because all of Peter's importance and his focus seems to lie and hang on Liz, who is not in any of the other Spider-Man films, by the way, but obviously MJ is, and her importance skyrockets, especially in Far From Home, which I know Trav said is not better than Homecoming. That might be true as a whole. I personally forget, but I will disagree in terms of Peter and MJ's chemistry. That blossoms in the next installment, and it's really cool given the fact that Tom Holland and Zendaya actually started dating here while filming Homecoming, and they're still dating to this day, so that chemistry is solid. I just wish that we saw more of it here. Liz is stupid. Not sorry. Another weird thing about his character here is that there is no origin story. I understand why. Obviously, we saw the same exact origin story twice already with Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, so we didn't need to see it again. But from the perspective of seeing all of the characters in the MCU up to this point, and for the most part, seeing their origin stories and just not seeing Peter's, it was weird to throw Spider-Man in there without an origin story, even though you already knew what it was. Oh well, maybe I'm just not so but so. My score for this film is going to be a solid A. It does everything that it needs to do. It's a great standalone film. The inclusion of Tony Stark is always going to be a choice that I have a hard time fully embracing, but ever since Endgame, I love going back and watching all of his involvement in all these little films. So even though I don't love it, I understand it, I appreciate it, and I embrace it now. It's time to hear some more from you guys. What are your feelings on Tom Holland's Spider-Man? Are you a fan? Are you not? Which of his films do you think is the best? What about the worst? Let me know, and as for YouTube, you guys know what to do. Hit the like, subscribe button, and bell to be notified when I come out with my next review, whatever and whenever that may be. But until then, have a good weekend, and peace!